Welcome to the Hunting Beast Report, a live video podcast with Dan Infalt and host Jeremy Gillespie.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors. The off-season's a great time to rehab your gear, so head on over to Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to pick up some climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, or stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Today's show is also made possible by Hunting Beast Gear, innovators in mobile hunting gear and the designers of the Beast Sticks and Beast Stand. Check out the latest products at www.huntingbeastgear.com. And now, on to the podcast. All right, we're live. Today we're joined by special guest Aaron Warbritton, famed of the hunting public, and as always, Dan Infalt. Aaron, how you doing today?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. Appreciate you jumping on. Dan, what's new in your neck of the woods?
I got a bad echo. What's going on here?
I don't know. That's not going to be on your end. Aaron, you got any echo for me or Dan?
Nope.
Not
Hold
sure.
on, I think I know what it is.
Okay. Well, while Dan's checking out his echo, Aaron, we wanted to get your opinion on the recent on-again, off-again trail camera ban in Iowa, specifically on public land. So first, what'd you think about that? Maybe how that rule came about, how it went away, and if you were king for a day, what would you do with trail cameras on public land in Iowa?
Oh, man. Well, when I saw the rule change or whatever, the reinterpretation of it, I guess, is what they were calling it. I was fine with it. I don't really have a preference that much about trail cameras. I mean, we use them some. They're a tool, but lately, as the cell cameras have become more affordable, just in the last few years, we're seeing a lot more of those in the woods, and especially in sensitive areas. You know, 6-7 years ago, when a cell camera was $400 or $500, and they didn't have tremendous battery life, you know, you could still use them and put a few of them out here and there, but the average guy couldn't afford to buy 10 or 15 of them. But just in the last couple of years, they've gotten pretty affordable. The technology's gotten better. The battery life's gotten better. So like guys can go back into bedding areas in July and August and set the things up with lithium batteries and leave them sit there all year. We were just running into a lot of cameras in general. I mean, even way back in there, not necessarily a ton of people, but just cameras all over the woods. And I don't know. It didn't really bother me one way or the other whenever they had that rule change. And like I was telling you guys before we started, we did a podcast about it. And we kind of did this round table thing where we all talked about it and talked about our feelings and whatnot. And then 2 days later, they flipped it around and they changed it. So the one thing that I did not like about it initially, and I think this is the reason why they changed it, is they did not, it was just like, boom. There was no public comment period that I'm aware of.
Yep.
There was nothing like that. It was just, and they called it a reinterpretation of an existing rule. But regardless, it was just one of those things that just popped up out of nowhere almost. And I feel like whether you agree with it or not is kind of a moot point. You don't want to set that precedent that they can just make decisions without talking to, the stakeholders, which in this case is pretty much everybody that uses public land, not just hunters, but anybody that's out there. They need to hold some sort of a public comment type deal or vote on it or whatever. And I think that's ultimately why they, backed that up or walked it back and changed the rule back around. But
We have those meetings in Wisconsin where you have rule change meetings, right? Kind of like what you're talking about. But what they don't do is they don't tell you when they're going to sell a property. And last year, I show up to on a property and the property sold. I've been hunting there for years. A great property. And there's no asking the public or anything. I really don't like that. I really think
I don't either. We've tried to fight that in a couple of different states, and it's happened more frequently, at least in our dealings with it, when the property is leased by the state for public use, not necessarily owned, and their lease will just run up and there will be negotiations in the background, and then poof, it'll be gone. So it might be a WMA, you know, for 15, 20, 30 years. And then all of a sudden, in the snap of a finger, it's gone. And it's like, man, if you guys would have asked us or would have said something about it, we could have helped you maybe keep it. Because in a lot of cases, it's because they didn't have the funding to keep it, or that's at least the excuse that I hear. They didn't have the funding to keep it, or they could only bid up to appraised value, or whatever it is. But it's like, man, I'd love to. I'm happy to help any way that we can, you know, whether it's just communicating to the public about it or actually helping raise funds for it or protect it in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, like you said, Dan, when they do that and they jerk the rug right out underneath of you, very frustrating. Mm-hmm. I don't know all the politics. I don't know how all that works. I just know that, you know, it ain't good when it gets taken away.
Right. Because, you know, you kind of feel like we're the boss of the DNR, you know?
Yeah, we are. I mean,
and they're not listening to us. It gets frustrating. I think the best thing we could do is that when we do see something like that, at least voice our opinions so that they're hearing that we're not happy about it.
Yeah, and I think that's what happened in this trail camera deal in Iowa. I'm not positive, but I know there was various groups and a lot of individuals that were, you know, going to the DNR and saying, look, y'all didn't ask us about this at all. You just made this change, and now here we are. So I think that's why they walked it back. But to answer your question, if I was king for a day, you know, or whatever, what I would do is I'd probably limit a lot of the technology out there. Personally, I'm fine whenever things get harder. I don't like it when opportunity gets taken away, but I don't mind it if you make something more challenging. And if you remove the trail camera aspect out of it, it makes it harder for people to hunt specific deer. You know, yeah, they have to put in more legwork to learn about those deer and those animals. So yeah, at the end of the day, though, they're still a tool. Mm-hmm. They don't kill the deer for you.
Yeah, I do feel like we do kind of got a little bit of a generation that's got the idea that hunting is just putting out a dozen trail cameras and checking them, you know, watching your phone until a deer shows up, and they lose the aspect of skill. You know, and I'd like to see people have more skill and learn how to hunt and learn woodsmanship, learn how to navigate through the woods, and learn how to pick apart sign rather than just putting a trail camera a place they see a rub, you know?
Yeah. That's my favorite part of hunting is the woodsmanship and the learning aspect of it. Anytime I go into a new public piece, that's the funnest part, is just trying to figure out how in the heck they're using it, or how in the heck a mature buck's using it. So, yeah, I agree with that.
Well, let's shift gears here. There's been a lot of movement in the hunting public, and when I mean it geographically. So for people that don't know, you no longer live in Iowa. I think if we were talking offline, Zach's in Denver now, and Greg's in South Dakota, right? So,
yeah,
you know, some marriages happen too.
Yeah.
What's that?
Some marriages happen too. That changes things.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the boys are getting married one after the other. Nick's getting married here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, talk about that, like the evolution, maybe from your hunting tactics and the business relationship, because obviously you guys are friends, but you're business partners too. So how have those geographic moves impacted what you guys do and how you do it?
It's definitely spread us all out. Like you were saying, Greg's in South Dakota now with Mindy, and Zach's out in Colorado. I'm in Missouri. I see Ted and Jake pretty regularly because, you know, I'm only a couple hours from the cabin in Iowa. And like I was telling you guys beforehand, all my in-laws are in Iowa as well. So we're up there a lot. And it's not hard for me to get up there and for those guys to get down here and vice versa. Nick's in Texas, so it's a challenge for him to get up here. Yeah, and then Hayden is running our merchandise out of the warehouse in Wisconsin. So there's guys all over the place. It definitely makes it more difficult to, go in and break down areas together and things like that. Everybody's kind of got their own permits now in different places. We still schedule lots of hunts together and try to get together as often as we can, but geographically challenging for sure.
Let's talk about that real quick, because you guys do a lot of different states, a lot of different style hunts. Give us some tips on organizing for like a regular guy that might want to do 1 or 2 out-of-state trips a year. How do you get organized at the level you are? Like, what kind of goes in your planning and logistics?
Oh, I start looking for kind of overlooked stuff as far as seasons go. So, most folks, if they're coming to the Midwest and they're buying an archery license, for example, they're going to come up here and they're going to hunt during the rut. That's what 90% of them are going to do. But very few of them will come up and hunt during the late season, or will hunt, in the middle of bow season. Sometimes they'll hunt at the beginning of bow season. If I'm traveling out of state, I'm looking at that as far as bow hunting is concerned, and I'm also looking at various firearm seasons that they have available. If a state has a gun season, for example, that's right in the middle of the rut, or right at the tail end of the rut, and it's a fairly short season, there's going to be a ton of people in the woods, and that can be helpful. That can help or hurt you depending on your strategy, of course. But I like to look for kind of oddball seasons, like a primitive weapon season that comes in 2 weeks after the gun, that's late in the year when people aren't as interested in getting out. It's starting to get really cold, or whatever the case may be. They've been bow hunting for 30 days and they're just burnt out on it. I like targeting those in a lot of cases when I'm traveling out of state. And if I'm going to a really tough state, I like those primitive weapon seasons. Bow hunting is fun, but man, like you guys know, it takes a long time sometimes to figure these things out.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can certainly do it in 5, 6, 7 days. But I definitely have had more luck targeting those off the wall seasons, or going at a weird time of the year. There's lots more that go into it too, but
I always thought that rut-wise on rut trips, especially to popular destinations, like the week before rut, like that last week of October in the Midwest, is a really good time if you know what you're doing, because you can really pattern deer. You can find a sign, you figure out where they're at, because they're laying down heavy sign, but they're still in a pattern, and you can kill those deer relatively easy if you know what you're doing and you do some footwork. Rut might be better, but it's not better if there's a guy 100 yards down the trail from you each way. And like when I went to Iowa, kind of your neck of the woods last year, I went the last week of October on purpose because of that, and I seen hardly anybody, and I had a lot of action, but I ended up having some bad hits again, my eyesight issues. But I came back the week of rut, or the first week of rut, like the first week of November, and my God, there was people everywhere. It was just a whole different game, and it was really hard to get away from people. I mean, there was deer all over the place, but the people were an issue, and I think for a lot of people, a little earlier or a little later is probably a better option.
Yeah, we've always had more success in Iowa bow hunting in October and the middle of November. I mean, we've killed them at the beginning of November as well, but we've seen the exact same thing in, the last decade or so hunting on public. Is November 1st hits the calendar, and for 7 or 8 days, it is a madhouse. It's packed. That's when every resident from Des Moines is taking their vacation and hitting the public woods. And all the non-residents that drew tags, that's when they take their vacation to come down. So, and I see the same thing in other states too, Dan, with hunting in October. That's probably my favorite month to hunt overall is October, and occasionally early season. But there are just fewer people in the woods, period.
I've certainly taken more deer, more big bucks the last 2 weeks of October than I have the first 2 weeks of November in my life.
Yep, same with us. I think the last 5 years we that would ring true with us as well across our whole group.
Dan, you sound like you're in a war zone over there today.
Yeah. I think the rat slayer came home and he's outside with some fireworks with my granddaughter.
Yeah.
There you go.
Tis the season, I guess. July 3rd, that's to be expected. So, Aaron, I've been a big fan for a long time. I watched, the majority of the hunting public stuff. One video specifically about a year ago, you guys did a video called "Reading Mean Comments," where you guys read a bunch of the comments from your haters, which I thought was entertaining. But to anybody that has any presence online, especially if people, we have a lot of people in our audience that like to film their hunts, a lot of people with YouTube channels. I mean, that's more popular than ever. How do you guys deal with the haters? And I want to preface this question with, a lot of people have never run a business, right? They don't understand what it takes, like the stress, the uncertainty of being a business owner. They don't understand overhead costs and things like that. So I think people, this is my perception, people want the hunting public to remain like super pure and not business oriented at all, but they also don't understand if you guys did that, you'd be out of business and there'd be no more videos. So how do you balance that?
Well, we balance that by we revert back to our mission statement all the time. And it's like, ultimately we're going to make videos for the viewers. That's number one. And then if we can make income after that, then that's great. But ultimately that's what it comes down to, is the content valuable for the viewers? Are they getting value out of it? And we try to keep a pulse of what's going on by reading comments, answering emails, talking to people at shows, all that stuff. Like whenever somebody walks up to us at a show and they say, we love the videos, or we love, a specific video like the one you just talked about, we always ask, well, why'd you like it? What'd you get out of it? Would you like to see more of that? Or would you like to see us do something different? Because we really rely on that feedback from just the average hunters of the world, because that's what we are. We want to create value for them first and foremost. So that's basically how the business decisions get made. I mean, I can't tell you how many sponsors we've said no to and how many dollars we've said no to. Big contracts for what, insert sponsor here. And we've just been like, no, we don't use those products very much. It's not a good fit. And if that particular brand wants too many deliverables or something that's going to take away from our ability to create content for the viewers, it's just a hard no. We don't do it. So that makes it, that kind of makes our decisions easier from the business standpoint. But the haters, they've seemed to pop up more and more as we've grown, which you would, I guess you'd expect. When we first started out with a few hundred people watching, there wasn't anybody that didn't like us. Everybody was all in, but as you go from a few hundred to a few thousand and then tens of thousands, you start getting some haters in there. But it doesn't really bother me that much. We read through their comments and get a kick out of it, like you saw in that video. Ultimately, I mean, if somebody comes to us with constructive criticism that has watched a ton of our videos, we listen and try to make adjustments if it makes sense. Like we're not immune to being, we're not perfect. We make mistakes just like everybody else, and we're always trying to get better. So if somebody comes to us and says, hey man, I like your videos, but you guys did this, this, and this that I wasn't a big fan of, and this is why, we listen to them and we try to talk to them. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, if it's just somebody that hates our guts, that I've never met before in my life, that has no clue what my character is, I don't give any time to that at all. Right. It's like, there's some people out there that just don't like us, and I've never spoke to them a day in my life. And they say all these things about how, we are a certain way. There was one post on Instagram not long ago that said, it had a picture of us on there, and it said the hunting public pays all of these people out of state to run dozens, even hundreds of trail cameras until their minions out there get pictures of a giant buck, and then they call the hunting public and they go kill it. And I just saw that
my way, because I've been getting that too. I saw the post on Instagram, and it was from somebody that hates our guts anyway. So I wasn't surprised.
But I saw it and I was just like, this is a lie, period. And then I just left, and I haven't went back since. I'm like, they don't understand that the hunting public as an entire organization between 8 people has a total of 22 trail cameras between all of us. We don't have hundreds of them. We don't pay people in other states to run cameras for us. Like, it's a total blatant lie to try to make us look bad, to try to harm our, credibility. And I don't give any time to that.
Yeah, it's really, you can tell the difference between constructive criticism or somebody who's like, I really don't like this part of it, and it's somebody who hates. And the haters, there's such a degree difference. There's so much of a difference between the criticism from a hater that you can tell it's a jealousy thing. The only reason somebody hates Aaron to the point that he's got to follow him, watch his videos, and make a comment every time about how bad of a person you are is because they wish they were Aaron, and they're not, and they have a problem with that. I get the same thing, and you can read into that. And what's funny is that I don't know if you use it, but YouTube's got that thing where you can turn off their comments and let them comment all they want. They can see it and they can wonder why nobody's responding, but they keep coming and watching. I like that.
I mean, I'm sure that there's a person or two I've met through the years that doesn't like me. That's fine. That's not a problem. But for the most part, if we have a few of those people that you're talking about that get on there and comment, or I don't know, they might be bots, who knows? But there's a few of them out there, and I know for a fact I've never spoken to that person. They've never, contacted me and tried to have a conversation with me about whatever issue it is that they're flustered about, and they're making these accusations about me or anybody at THP, and they just, it's like, man, if that person is just going to hate you without ever even getting to know you, or to heck with that. I'm not going to spend any time worrying about something like that.
Right.
Well, let's get on to something a little more fun, and that's deer hunting. So I just wanted to bring that up, though, because that's prevalent. And like I said, anybody that's got a YouTube channel, to some degree, they're probably dealing with that. So good to hear from someone that's dealing with it at scale. But let's talk about your bread and butter, what I consider THP's bread and butter, which is run and gun public land hunting. So obviously, I think everybody that watches Dan's channel is going to be familiar with your origin story at Midwest Whitetail, and then you and Greg started the hunting public. But I know you guys were doing some public hunting back when you were filming for Bill. How, since your first year at THP to now, how has your public land strategy evolved? What were you doing initially? What did you find that worked, didn't work, and where are you at now and why?
Actually, me, Greg, and Zach all came from Midwest Whitetail and started the hunting public after we left. But you're right, we were all hunting public land before that, and we started hunting. I mean, we've all hunted public land before Midwest Whitetail, and then up until I started working there in 2011, I'd hunted some public land back at home in Missouri, where I grew up. But then in 2011, 2012, when we moved to Iowa, we had trouble finding places to hunt. So we just started going to public land out of necessity. I mean, that's where, we knocked on dozens of doors and tried to get permission places and had minimal success doing that. So we just went back to public and hunted there and had mixed results for a few years, basically just hunting hard through the rut, sitting all day, trying to sit bedding areas, wherever we could find doe groups, and we had decent luck doing that. But the real light bulbs didn't start turning on until we started following Dan and like Greg Blitzinger, and at the time, I don't know if Joe Elzinger's still on the Hunting Beast or not, but he was another one of them. And all you guys were talking about was bedding. And we had this giant library of footage at Midwest Whitetail from pro staff all over the country. And then of course, all of Bill's hunts and all these specific deer that he'd hunted on his farm over the years. And when we started hearing about the whole sort of buck bedding concept, all these light bulbs were just going off day and night. I mean, we were spending all night long at the office looking through footage and like past encounters of bucks. And it was, the amount of learning that we did in that 3 or 4 year period, basically from 2015 through when we started THP 2017, 2018 was a ton. Like we shifted our focus. We were already hunting bedding in the rut, but we shifted our focus into why are they bedded where they are. And that made such a huge difference because, and we got confidence doing that really quickly because we could look back at all of these previous hunts from years and years past and all these videos. And then we would interview the guys on the pro staff or talk to Bill about like which area of the farm this deer was using and when he killed him or when he saw him there. I mean, you start to put little pieces together and you realize that a lot of these big bucks are in places where people don't go. And some of them are small, little hidey holes right off the side of a road. Some of them are 2 miles back in a big thicket. But man, that was just that if we learn, I mean, we learned a lot from you, Dan, as far as the bedding stuff is concerned. But if there's one thing that really sticks out, that's it. It was always like you used to talk about going to a property and like, just tell me, go onto a property, tell me where your tree stands are, tell me where you're hunting. And I'll tell you where the big buck is. And I don't even have to step foot on it half the time because you just see where the people go. And then boom, we started actually doing that and going out to people's private properties about that time in 2017, 2018. And we would look at a map, get some general info, go gomming in there, and we would find these bedding holes that are back in there. Not necessarily just specific beds, but areas of the property that were not getting hunted. And it was without fail, almost. I mean, there's no such thing as always, I guess, in deer hunting. Always and never don't exist, but almost without fail, every property we looked at, public or private, you just find out where the people don't go, and boom, there they are.
That was amazing to watch you guys work when you first started the hunt in public, and you just rose so fast. It was incredible, actually. The way you
remember that? You remember that buck nest hunt that we had? That was when we were still at Midwest Whitetail the year before the hunting public. And I remember texting back and forth with you like immediately after that hunt because it was early October. It's like October lull time frame. You're not supposed to see mature bucks. You know, everybody on the pro staff that we're working with is saving their stuff for the rut. Everybody's running cameras and hunting the edges and not going in, not diving in deep. And we pulled the trigger and went in deep to this bedding area that we'd scouted during the summer, and we jumped some big bucks out of there in June. And we went and hung over that, and we saw 15 bucks in one night, and I think 5 or 6 shooters. And I mean, like 5 bucks that were mature bucks, big bucks. And it was we didn't kill a deer that night, but it was the most insane bedding area hunt I've had. And I remember you saying, Dan, like, some of your very best hunts were the very, very first time you ever sat in one of those bedding areas. And they were good after, but the very best ones was the very first time. And that was the very first time that we had ever sat there. And it was just insane. October 6th or something, seeing 15 bucks all just standing up, popping up out of this grass everywhere in front of us.
I remember you texting me about that. You were really excited, and it was kind of cool to see that fire.
Yeah, it was like everything that we had learned all came to fruition in one night. You know, and that was, we were lucky to be hunting in Iowa where you got more bucks to deal with. So you could kind of see that take place. If you're hunting in a tougher area, it may take you years before you have enough encounters to where it really starts to click. But in that case, everything that we had learned about the bedding stuff, it all came to fruition in that one evening. It's like, man, when we walked out there that night, we're like, there is no doubt that there is something to this because we've got the video proof of it from the last 3 hours. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why Dan's tactics resonate with people so much. And Aaron, you talked about it, like the pro staffers, the guys that are privileged to have private land to hunt. They have the luxury of playing it safe, you know, hunting the edges, sitting back, waiting for prime time. But if you're on public land, especially if you're after a specific deer or a bigger specific class of deer, you usually don't have the luxury, right? You got competition. You got to worry about other people pressuring that deer out of there. And one of the most effective ways to get on a big buck early is to hunt a bedding area, to understand the mechanics of it, how to scout it, how to set up on it. And I think that's why Dan and his tactics have gotten as popular as they have.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're always focused on bedding, it seems like, and unless sometimes during the late season we focus on like obscure food sources, and we've seen big bucks even in pressured areas travel real far to get to those food sources. But man, they got to have extreme cold weather, and in Iowa, like Dan alluded to a while ago, pressure's really hot and heavy the first week in November, and then we've got 2 weeks of what used to be party hunting during shotgun season, where the public just gets murked. I mean, there's people everywhere and shooting and everything. But then after that, it quiets way down. So like 2 or 3 weeks after that gun season is over with, as that pressure has fallen off, you do see bucks traveling pretty far during the daylight to get to some food sources. But other than that, I mean, 90% of the time it's associated with bedding.
Well, something else I want to talk to you about. It seems like a few years ago, don't quote me on the year, 19, 20, somewhere in there, you guys were pretty ambitious. You had a lot of tags in a lot of different states, and you ended up getting spread pretty thin. This is my perception. And it seems like maybe the last year or two, you guys have scaled back on the number of states, but extended the hunt length in those states. So talk to me about that decision and where that came from, and, you know, what are the results been from that?
Well, we traveled to turkey hunt, and we travel all over to turkey hunt. And what we found in doing that is, you know, with a decent amount of preparation, we can go turkey hunting, and sometimes we can have success in 2 to 5 days in a state. We can just go in there, show up, set up camp, and get on some turkeys. With deer, we weren't seeing the same results. You know, it seemed like with deer, about day 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there, we really started to put stuff together, and then we'd have to leave because we had a tag in another state that we were trying to get to. And that happened that one year that you're talking about, because we just we overextended ourselves. So we would end up hunting a state for like 6 days or 5 days, and then we'd move somewhere else. And every time we were leaving, we were getting on stuff. It's like, why are we leaving when we're just now putting the pieces together and we're not even going back? So yeah, we've necked that way down since, to where, you know, this year I may have 2 tags in 2 different states and plan on hunting and scouting those. And I've been scouting a lot of the areas that I'm going to hunt since last winter in both of those states, you know. And if I get lucky and kill 2 bucks in those 2 states, then I might think about grabbing a tag somewhere else and going from there. But those are going to be my focus. And like I said before the podcast, I'm trying to take the kids out as much as possible. So if they want to go, I just pretty well shelve whatever I have going on and take them. So
I kind of struggle with that myself, because part of me really likes to as you know, go pick apart something new. I love to go into hard places where people say you can't do it, and pick it apart and do a week-long hunt. And like you said, at the end of the week, I kind of got to figure it out, but it's too late. And I've already, in kind of figuring it out, I've walked through some of the areas, and I know I could go back there the next year and probably have a lot more success. I'd probably kill a lot more if I went back to the same places, which is what most people do. But there's this thing in me, always pulls me in, but I haven't hunted over here yet, you know, and I got to do a little more of returning to some of those places, so I have a little more kills under my belt, you know, when I do travel. Not that I need it, but I think it helps for the show and stuff, you know, just at least a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for that. I gotta see what's over the next ridge or what's in the next county or whatever. I gotta go and look. I'm always interested in new ground, even if we just go and hunt it for 2 days and then we never return. I mean, I like just seeing and learning new places, because every time you do that, even if you don't kill something, I feel like you learn so much more about, you know, the deer in that particular area. Like when we go down south and hunt in those southern states, it's a lot different than it is hunting Iowa public land. And there's, I mean, you can find public land in Iowa an hour down the road that's different than the stuff that's next to our place. So that's definitely one thing I love about hunting public is just bouncing around.
Well, we like to talk about specific tactics on the show, and you guys have had a lot of great decoy hunts. That's something that not everybody is doing or everybody has tried. So maybe think back to one or two of your favorite decoy hunts and give us some tips on what kind of setup would make you feel confident to use a decoy, maybe some mistakes you've made. Just talk about decoys in general.
Man, we don't use them very often, actually, but I was thinking about that the other day. The percentage that they've worked is really high. We've probably used decoys a few dozen times, and we've killed a handful of bucks over them.
A couple nice ones too.
Yeah. And I remember the one deer that me and Zach killed in 2015. We shot him 100 yards from the parking lot. The car was literally sitting within sight of the tree that we're in, and the decoy's out there in that field because we'd saw bucks in it the day before. And that was in the middle of a rut, and they were pushing does out of the bedding and into this big, thick CRP grass field, and you just didn't know when they were going to do it, but they had done it part of the day before. So instead of going way back up in there, it was a real calm morning starting off and warm. So we just set up right on the edge of that thing in a little waterway where the grass was shorter, where they could see the decoy. I think that's a big deal. Calling works obviously real well for deer. But it's kind of hit or miss. If you're calling to a buck and you're not in a perfect scenario and it's like a big pressured mature deer, he's probably going to come in and wind you, or he's going to come in and figure you out if you're not in the right scenario. And with a decoy, you can mitigate a lot of those things because, you're catching his attention audibly with the sound. Then he's coming in and he's confirming that that's a buck there when he sees that decoy. So we're way more aggressive with our calling. We don't do a lot of blind calling when we're just set up in a tree with no decoy, but we will do it more frequently with a decoy. Because if we get one that if we set it up right where the wind's coming, from the bedding area to us, and that deer starts coming out of the bedding and he sees that decoy, a lot of times they just drop their guard once they confirm that it's another buck and they come straight to him. Sometimes they circle downwind of him, but man, we've had some really, really close encounters. And the one big thing I've noticed is you can get away with so much more in your setup when you have a decoy.
Yeah.
So we
they abandon their peripheral vision. Like they do magnet right on that.
I mean, we set up on the ground one time, me and Ted, and killed one on a little bitty piece of public. There was only a few trees on the whole place. And there was one tree, and we were going in there with the decoy with plans to set up in that tree. And when we got there in the dark, I looked up in this thing, and there's just limbs everywhere. And up there where we were going to have to hang at, there was no cover at all. And the wind wasn't perfect out of that tree. So it was like all these things are going against us. And, we're putting two guys in a tree, which doesn't help you hide. So we're looking at this thing in the dark, and then we look over about 30 yards away, and there's this baby cedar tree that's out in some, ankle to knee high grass. There's not enough cover there to hide you. But we're like, man, the wind is perfect to sit right there. So we've got to make a setup right there. And we got Herman, our decoy, with us. So let's put him out on the upwind side of us, and then we'll just kind of use that cedar tree. We'll just move around that cedar tree. If we see deer coming across this field, we'll just keep that cedar tree in between them and us as they're coming across the field. And then they'll see the decoy, and that'll take their attention off of it. I ended up shooting a buck at like 10 yards off the ground. I mean, at one point he was walking right at me, and I was in the wide open at full draw, and he didn't see me or Ted sitting there, because he was so focused on that decoy. But I mean, that's kind of like your hunts, Dan. You talked about digging a hole in the ground, didn't you? Yep. Didn't you do that once?
I shot two bucks out of that hole.
Yeah, I mean, it's just getting to the X, getting to the spot where you need to get to, in making it work.
That's really more important than people think. I mean, when you get in that zone, there's like an area you got to be, and you're like, this is the kill area, and then you got to figure out how to make it work. If there's no trees, you got to hunt off the ground. If there's a mediocre tree, maybe you got to get in a mediocre tree, but you ain't going to kill that buck if you're 40 yards over. You know what I mean? You got to be where you got to be.
Yeah, I don't even like being 40 yards over. Some people will set up there and they're like, oh, I can shoot the trail at 38 steps or 44 yards or whatever. It's like, nah, I want that sucker 25 and in.
I have a hard
whatever I got to do to get there to into that bubble that we'll just set up there and deal with the consequences. You know, and a lot of times it doesn't work, but when it does, you get a real, you know, high odds chance at one. And you only got to guess right once or twice in a season to make it.
Mm-hmm.
According to that mean comments video, Aaron, you only shoot 10 yards when the game warden's holding your hand. That's what one of the comments was. That one cracked me
I'm
up.
pretty particular.
Yeah.
People fuss at me about that, but you know, you can't please everybody. It's either people pat you on the back for being, you know, real cautious about your shots and careful about your shots, and then people throw stones at you for not flinging arrows. I mean, there's just no way that. I mean, everybody's different. I just I'm very aware that I want to get those deer close. The majority of the bucks that I've killed with a bow, if I averaged it out, it'd be like 16 yards, 17 yards. Might be killed one of them at 30 and one of them at 40, but the rest of them are 15 to 25.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot. Let's talk about access a little bit. I think, you know, that's something that is a known thing that's important. It's not overlooked, but I still think it should be more of a focus than it is for a lot of people. So 2 things. Talk about when you are in an area that you've already pre-scouted, like in the summer, the spring, postseason. What are you looking at what are you looking at to plan your access? And then 2, you guys, at least initially, haven't seen as much lately. You did a lot of water access, either Ted's boat, kayaks and stuff. And I feel like that's a good way to get some separation and get some of those untouched areas. So talk about access in general and then water access specifically.
We still do a fair amount of water access. We just may or may not show it on some of the videos.
Sure.
You know, if we're hunting a big reservoir with landmarks in the background, we can't film that. Otherwise, you know, a lot of people will be able to figure out exactly where we're at. And I'm all for getting people in the woods, but I don't want to hotspot a specific area. Mm-hmm. So we still use water access an awful lot. If you haven't seen it that much, it's just because we may omit that from a video just to keep that area from getting, you know, from hotspotting the area, if you will. But yeah, access is a huge deal. And one thing I'm always looking at is the conditions. So whenever you're accessing a bedding area, as you guys know, you might scout 10 bedding areas and one of them works great for access. And the rest of them, there's little wrinkles here or there that you got to think your way around somehow. It's like ideal scenario is a dry creek bed that's right next to a bedding area, and you can walk right up that sucker and pop up in a tree and basically shoot into the bedding. You know, then you're out of sight, you're quiet going in. That's perfect, but they don't all work that way, obviously. And some of the more what I would call sensitive bedding areas where you've got to go through and really blow out a lot of deer, or you just have to go in on flat ground and you have to basically sacrifice a portion of that bedding area to get where you need to be to kill the deer. I'll watch the conditions and wait until it's wet and windy and go in for a morning hunt or go in the middle of the day when the day winds are real high. Access is a pain when it's real calm and it's crunchy. It's like you got to go so slow when you get in tight. You could make it a mile back there in 30 minutes and then 20 yards in an hour. It's so much. And to get 2 guys in a tree, then it becomes even more difficult. So I'm always watching conditions. I love that wet, windy conditions, whether and even if it's early in the season, if it's wet and windy after a thunderstorm or something, we'll go in for a morning hunt and go right into the middle of a sensitive bedding area if we can get away with it. I'm not real worried about the temperature so much in a cold fronts, warm fronts, whatever. But if we get those conditions, then it's game on. We're going in, we're getting in, and we're getting in tight.
One thing that I was wondering about is a lot of the places where I've killed a lot of my bigger bucks, you couldn't get a second stand in the tree. Do you guys, ever just go solo and go with a camera arm? Or?
We do sometimes. Sometimes we put, if there's two trees, little toothpicks, we'll put one guy in one and one guy in the other, just back a little ways. Like we were hunting Arkansas a few years ago, and the trees that we had to work with are the size of my forearm. And you could get just barely maybe out of the deer's line of sight 6 feet up, but if you went any further, the tree would just bow over, So what we did is we just went one stick up, and I was in one tree in front, and Curl Roy was filming behind me in another tree about 10 yards back. And I couldn't sit the entire time because I was stuck out from the tree. It was just a telephone pole. It was just a toothpick straight up. So I just stood the whole time facing at the hole in the trail. And we had some bucks come through. Nothing that I shot, but they did come through, and they didn't pick us off at 15 or 20 yards. But yeah, we run into all that. Like you said a while ago, it's just figuring out a way to make the setup work. And it's definitely more challenging with two of you in there.
And then, Aaron, everybody wants to know the one that got away stories and what is the most challenging state you've hunted. Everybody thinks that their state's the hardest, and there's plenty of difficult states out there. But of the places you've hunted, what's been the most challenging and why? And then give us a good the one that got away story.
Man, for whitetails, I don't know which one would be the hardest. I would say probably Georgia. That was pretty tough. But me and Dan have hunted PA and Michigan together during the public land challenge in the past, and we heard all the horror stories going into those, and those were actually pretty good. It was way better than I thought. But in some of the hunting down south is really good. Just that particular area we hunted in Georgia, it was fairly low deer density, and it was just big, rolling, monotonous woods. It was hard to figure out. If we saw one deer in a whole day of hunting from daylight to dark, even if we just spooked it, that was doing something.
Well,
I'm sorry. What was the other aspect of your question you asked? I forgot.
Yeah, which state, and then the one that got away. What's the buck that haunts you? The one that got away.
You take your pick. There's so many of those. That's a novel. But there's a couple of them that got my wind at the last minute that really ticked me off when it happened. There's some really big ones that got away where I was at full draw and just about took the shot and just didn't quite work, and I wasn't too mad about those. But there was a couple of them where I went in, we set up on the bedding, we scouted it, we had high confidence that they were there. They stood up right where we expected them to be on the X, winds coming straight from them, and they got in there. I'm at full draw, and they're at 30 yards getting ready to walk into the lane. I'm talking like 1 or 2 steps, and zoop, put on the brakes, little wind switch, or just 6 cents, whatever you'd call it. I think it's a wind switch. The 3 times I can think of was just a little flutter from the backside, and that was what they caught. And they turned around and got out of there. Some of them just creeped out the way they come in, and I can think of one of them that just tore out of there, and he was gone, motoring 300 yards until he was out of sight. But those ticked me off because we had put so much time into that hunt, and we were right about everything. And they just have a way of getting away.
Right.
They just do. And one more step and they would have gotten an arrow.
For me, the ones that bother me the most aren't really the biggest bucks. It's the ones that happened when I was young and beginning and starting, and you really wanted it really bad, And when he was asking you that question, I was thinking back to a hunt when I was probably about 11 or 12, and I got a compound bow at a rummage sale that was really beat up. And that's what I was using, and it was really in bad condition. And it didn't fit me. It was, that's the way things were back in those days, And I had this doe come in. I had her walk underneath me, and I was up in a tree hanging on a limb. And it was a big deal back in those days to shoot a deer. There wasn't a big population, especially in southern Wisconsin in those days. And I pulled that bow back to full draw, and that doe looks up at me, and it's like 5 yards. I mean, it's right there. And while I'm at full draw, about to drop the pin or the string, the bow exploded.
Oh, good grief.
Boom!
Oh,
it's off of the things, and I'm sitting there with this limp string in shock, and I look down, and the doe is just still sitting there looking at me like this. I couldn't do a thing. And that one, I don't know why, but that just sticks in my mind more so than the big bucks that got away. Probably because of the age I was at the time. But
yeah. Yeah, it's not the biggest ones that tick me off. I mean, I can think of a couple really big ones that got away it was really close to getting a shot, and it just didn't work out. And those didn't bum me out as much as those that I was just talking about, where it was like one step away in the bedding and they were coming right in. I mean, it was like the trap was set and he was reading the script all the way in. Oh, man, that drove me nuts. Yeah. Especially in the one spot, because the one bedding area was a spot where we'd been trying to kill a buck for like 4 years. And every year we'd hunted it like 10 different ways. Every year we had a close call in there, and we could not kill one in that spot for whatever reason, just bad juju. And that year I was like, we got him figured out this time. We're going in. We literally snuck past this thing in his bed in a creek 20 yards from him to get the wind right, because our wind stayed down in the creek, in the dry creek bed. So our wind's blowing right at the deer, but we know if we're low enough in that creek and it's dry, that milkweed just goes right down the creek and it doesn't hop up out of it. So we're like, to heck with it. This is the way to get in here without spooking him. So we went in and went right past the beds. I mean, right past them. And our wind just blew right down the creek. Perfect. Hooked all the way around him, got up in the tree 80 yards away, staring at the beds. And boom, stands up 2 hours before dark and walks right at the tree. And the wind just turned at the last little bit, and I couldn't figure it out. I dropped my whole pouch full of milkweed trying to figure out what was going on. And finally I could see it. I could see it going back in the timber behind me, like 150 yards in there, and then it would come back like a vacuum almost. And it was just floating across that trail at 30 yards, and that's what he hit.
They're clever. They're real clever.
Oh man, drove me nuts. Either hit that or he hit her a ground scent, because we hadn't been up in the tree that long. Like, we'd only been up there for an hour and a half or so. And I don't know, Ted Miller mentions this. I don't know if you've had experience with this too, Dan, but it seems like to me, if you go in early and you leave ground scent and you allow, time to dissipate that scent a little bit, they don't pick up on it as much. Like Ted always goes into his bedding areas to check his cameras first thing in the morning. Mm-hmm. Because he doesn't want to hunt it. Yeah, he doesn't want to leave scent in there right in the afternoon before the deer stand up and are walking through there. He wants to leave scent right when they get back to their beds in the morning. That way they've got 8-9 hours for that scent to dissipate out of there.
Makes sense.
But I don't know what happened on that one. I just know he smelled us, and he smelled a rat and was gone. And I was ticked.
Lucky buck.
Yeah.
We're gonna bring Ashley on to take some questions from the chat, and I've got one question. I imagine if it's not in the chat already, it will be. So I'll go ahead and ask it. When, if ever, are you guys going to bring back the Public Land Challenge? That was a super popular series. A lot of people have asked about that. So you don't have to say why it went away. That doesn't matter. Is it coming back? If so, when?
Oh, I'll tell you why we haven't done it. And it's just because of the workload for the guys. Like like Dan will tell you, we were trying to get it going this last summer again. And just one thing or another with scheduling, we couldn't pull everybody in. You know, when we first started this, geographically, we were all in one spot. So when we went on these trips, we would all go. So now with everybody spread out all over the place, it's harder to get everybody's schedules aligned. I mean, when we started this and back in the Midwest Whitetail days, I hunted 60, 70 times a fall. And now I'm doing maybe half that because I'm home with the boys. So there's a pile of excuses I got as to why we haven't been doing it, but we want to do it. But the logistics part of it and the editing is challenging for us because it's a lot of work for our guys to sit down and edit 4 groups worth of footage every day. So if we do,
don't realize is when I was there, I noticed that like you'd have a trailer and there'd be 2 guys that the people watching the show never see, just editing nonstop, that aren't even involved in the hunting, which is hard on somebody. I mean, a week of just editing it, you know, I get it.
Yeah. But I mean, we want to do it again. I think it's just a matter of time before we do. We'll just probably scale it back a little bit. Instead of having like 4, 5, 6 teams out there, we'll probably just have 3, you know, just to make it a little more manageable.
I think everybody's rooting for that. So, Aaron, before we jump into the questions, I want to say thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on. Dan, I want to turn it over to you if you had anything else you wanted to add, and if not, Ashley, take it away.
Yeah, just really appreciate you coming on, Aaron. I've always looked up to you, the way you carry yourself in hunting. I think you're an incredible role model, despite what all the haters say.
I appreciate you, Dan. You know we wouldn't be here without you, so means a lot.
Any questions, Ashley?
She's you're muted. You're muted. Still can't hear you. Might have to rejoin. Okay, Ashley's going to rejoin. So while Ashley's rejoining, if you can share, Aaron, what are your plans for this fall? As far as, I know you mentioned some states, or you want to keep that under wraps?
I'm going to try to go elk hunting with the guys for a week or so. One of my best friends drew a once-in-a-lifetime elk tag, so I'm going to try to go with him for a couple of days. I don't know how much deer hunting I'm going to do in September. And then I don't really know. I might go to Arkansas, but I'm probably just going to be hunting around home. We'll be hunting in Missouri and Iowa with the guys. The other guys have got all kinds of plans, but I'm not going to venture too far from home because I want to be close enough where I can take the boys if they get a chance to go.
No, that's great. Ashley's back. Can we hear you now, Ashley?
I don't know. Can you?
Yes, we can. Yep. Take it away.
All right. So there was also, before I get to questions, Glor59 left Dan the Man a super chat, and then Brian Griggs joined, and then I just wanted to say thank you to Zeke Outdoors, Jacob Nolting, Matthew, if I butcher these, I'm sorry, Witchter, The Hunting Factor, Tony Francis, and Steve Schwartz. I think that was all of them.
Thanks, guys.
And then there's a slew of questions. The first one is from John91083. He said, what type of terrain do you guys prefer or feel like you have a better chance at harvesting a mature buck from? Big woods, hill country, swamps, farmland, etc.
Me personally, I think it depends on the time of the year. I'd rather hunt open stuff during the beginning of the year where I can observe and I can see. And then as it gets later in the year, I'd rather transition into the hills and the more heavily wooded country. Just personal preference. I've hunted acorns and big woods and ain't had as much luck hunting early season in that type of scenario as I have had late October into the rut and then late season. Had luck late season hunting big woods too, but not early.
What about you, Dan? Anything different?
Yeah, it's a little different. I like marshes and swamps early because if you know where they're bedded, you can get really close to them. You can cut them off. You get good daylight movement. And then come rut, I kind of like shifting to hill country because they're real predictable in hill country. You can kind of really tell how they're going to travel the land from a map. late season, I like farm country because they really lock into food sources, and it's like you can get large groups of deer that'll have everything. All the bucks, they're easy to find. That's about it for me.
All right. Next question is from Farrell. He's wondering, Aaron, what are some of the best dishes Nick has cooked up for y'all?
Oh man, anything he makes is good. I suck at cooking, so I mean anything that he makes. I'm trying to think. He made those venison smash burgers, and those things were pretty lit. Those were awesome. Anytime we kill a deer, we immediately take the back straps out and just go hand them to him, and he just works his magic on them.
Is there any other ones that are at the top of those?
Man, anytime we kill a turkey, we bring it back, and he whips his Blackstone grill out, and he puts rice and vegetables in there, and just kind of makes a stir fry deal with turkey, and that is money. That is awesome. Turkeys don't last very long in camp. We kill one, it's pretty much gone by the next day.
Y'all are going to have to make a cookbook, or Nick's going to have to make a cookbook if he hasn't already.
He should. He definitely should. He's been doing them shorts that we post on the TikTok and the other social media and stuff, but he's got a bunch more recipes. He's very good at the cooking.
Yeah, move over and look out for Nick.
Rod Grubb was wondering, Aaron, are you going to be in New York this year? Which I think you kind of answered that earlier.
I'm sorry, I only got the end of that question. What did you say?
I was wondering if you were going to be in New York, which I'm pretty sure you answered earlier.
Probably not this year, but I don't know. It depends on how the first part of the season goes. If we knock a couple bucks down, then that opens a lot of doors where we might try to get to the Northeast or out east. I know Zach is wanting to get out east, so it's possible that we're up there. We kind of make a base plan with like 5 or 6 areas between the whole group, and then if we knock a couple bucks out in those areas, then we have 4 or 5 other that are kind of plan B spots that we'll go and visit. And New York, PA is on that secondary list. So,
gotcha. Jacob Nolting is wondering, what are some good strategies to get eyes on mature bucks for glassing and observing during this time of year? Probably in all of you, if you guys have opinions on that.
Farmland.
Yeah, basically open areas, But I've got some areas that are set up for the swamps where you got an open patch they walk through of like low swamp grass or a wet area that's water and grass that you can see. But those are unique situations. You kind of got to look for them, and you have to be looking for them because you have to have that mindset. But there are places you can glass even in swamps and stuff at this time of year. But my main glassing at this time of the year is usually from a truck. I do have some spots that I slide into and sit for an evening and deal with the mosquitoes. But for the most part, it's done out of a truck.
I wouldn't overlook just any type of native natural browse too. Like they eat bucks, especially like tall grass and forbs this time of year. I don't know that it pulls them like soybeans does, but see a lot of bucks just browsing on forbs in tall grass CRP fields or in certain sections of those fields. So I wouldn't overlook that. If you have a giant public area, you may not have thousands of acres of soybeans to look at, but you might have a bunch of native grass type areas. And if portions of those fields have forbs growing in them, that's a good place to look.
Next question. I kind of want to know the same thing too. Farrell is wondering, what's the story behind Ted's bucket hat? And then his second portion to the question is, how has the hunting public crew resisted its allure?
I don't know. I look like an idiot in that thing. So that's probably why I don't wear it. But I don't know. He's always worn it. He wore it, I think, the first time he came down to interview with us when he was like 17 years old. He had that ratty old thing with him, and he's just always worn it. I don't know. His dad doesn't wear a bucket hat that often, but that's kind of his deal. And He loves them.
That's fair. Paul Burnett is wondering what you think, what Aaron thinks about kill plots and is land management hunting. He's wondering if the distinctions between the two are getting blurred.
Oh, definitely. I'm sure. I do think kill plots are effective if you're managing your own private land. But more and more, I'm of the opinion that if you do general habitat improvement on public or private land across the entire landscape, it's going to benefit you more than just trying to plant a kill plot to shoot a buck. Like if you go in and you do targeted timber management and then burning, I didn't learn this till just a few years ago, but if you take a piece of closed canopy forest, like a section of it, there might be like 50 pounds per acre of food in there. I don't know if that figure's right, but the way the biologist explained it to me, or Matt and Adam, the habitat guys I'm friends with that run Land and Legacy, you can increase that from 50 pounds on an acre to thousands if you cut a few trees down, allow some sunlight to get to the ground, and then burn it. And just doing that, if you do that across even a small property, 20, 30, 40 acres, you increase the food value on the entire property and the usability of the entire property from a deer's perspective, like 10-fold, 20-fold, 30-fold. I think focusing on that type of stuff and really bringing their native habitat back to the forefront is probably more important than just trying to plant a kill plot in the woods. I mean, yes, a kill plot, if put in the right spot next to a bedding area, might help you get a close range shot at a deer, and that may be one of your goals that you're after. But if you're thinking out ahead 4, 5, 10 years down the road and you prioritize habitat in general, that's going to benefit you more downrange.
Right.
People don't get how much deer eat, like just browse. I mean, they're constantly eating, and a lot of mature bucks in pressured areas just are not going to food plots and stuff like that in daylight. Even kill plots. I mean, if you hunt them more than once or twice a year, they start to figure it out, especially in really pressured areas. I mean, if you get to less pressured areas and managed areas, it's a little different. But I mean, you look at like the marsh by my house. I used to hunt it a lot more when there's more big bucks around here, and you would drive around and shine at night, and there'd be certain bucks that live in this marsh you'd never see in a field. And when you field dress them, there wouldn't be corn in them or anything else. It'd just be green, They spend a lot of their time in these swamps just eating things you don't even know about. I mean, it's crazy. I think the amount of like clover, beans, and stuff that they eat is probably minute next to what they eat on their way there, on their way back, while they're browsing near their bedding area and stuff. You really can't base nothing on food, unless it's a micro food plot that's something they really like, But
Right.
they just eat a lot more than just food plots and acorns.
Oh, way more. That buck nest that we were talking about earlier, Dan, that bottom, when you start looking at the plant community that is growing down there, there's literally hundreds of different plants within 200 yards of those beds. And 500 yards from the beds are standing cornfields, bean fields, food plots on the neighbors, all that stuff. And all those bucks that they're running cameras and getting pictures of on those fields are in that buck nest.
Yep.
And that's where they're living. And when they stand up out there, they're not just walking to the beans. They're doing just like you said. They're going through there and they're eating a variety of different plants. I mean, the scientific term is concentrate selector, I think, or something like that. You'd have to ask Bronson or go look at what the MSU guys do, because I probably butcher a lot of this terminology. I understand it, but I don't know how to talk it. Bottom line is that they eat lots and lots of different species of plants every single day, and browse makes up a majority of their diet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you guys. And then also just improving the habitat, not just burning and stuff, but creating spots where they can hide and hang out and they feel safe too. Because there's a lot of people that'll go through and they'll burn and they'll cut, but then everything's wide open. And they, like in our area, they're not entirely that excited to come out into those open areas unless you hinge cut and drop stuff and actually make them sheltering areas.
Yep.
But Sorry, my brain. Next question is from DC149. He said, "What's next? Any new plans or teasers?"
Not really. We're kind of in that process right now. We're in limbo in between turkey season and deer season. So we're talking every week about what we're doing, where we're going, what tags we have. There's several spots that I've had my eye on for the last year that I've been scouting a lot that I'm not running cameras in any of them. So I don't know what is in there. I haven't even went out to try to observe and see what kind of bucks are around. I've basically just been doing preliminary scouting and trying to figure out the lay of the land so that I know how to get in and out of there without boogering everything. So I'm kind of at the beginning stages of learning these areas. But I'm hoping that by fall I have, with 5-6 more scouting trips in between now and then, I'll have the info needed to have some action in there.
Right. Gotcha. Walker Bass wanted to know, do all of the guys have day jobs, or do they live off of or do some of them live off of what they get from the channel?
We all work through the Hunting Public. The Woods Guys Inc. is our company that owns the Hunting Public. The Woods Guys Inc. is a production company. So we don't live off of the revenue just earned from the channel. Like, we have multiple buckets. Not any one of them is significant by itself. But we're able to do a variety of things. We make some money off the merchandise. We make some money off of our YouTube revenue. We make some money off of sponsorships. We make some money off of custom production work that we do. I mean, the first couple years we did THP, that was the only way we made money, was off of like editing other people's videos in the background. So, and then for a while we did some consulting during the off season where we would go to properties and help people break them down and figure them out. And that's that sort of thing. Then we make a little bit off the podcast. I mean, there's just this little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. And that's what helps us, maintain and run it. The merchandise has really helped a lot, though, in the last couple of years with Hayden running that in Wisconsin.
Every time we go to the shows, there's all the kids with mullets running around in the Hunting Public here, and I think it's like,
oh, yeah, everybody's wearing it.
Happy. And they always have mullets too, mullets and boots.
I mean, I'm glad they're buying the merchandise, but that's the most rewarding part of what we do, is going to the shows and talking to young families that, I mean, you guys know, with the way phones are today and technology, there's so much stuff on these things that kids can get wrapped up in. Yeah. And parents come to us all the time and are like, thank you for putting out hunting content, because my kid will be down a rabbit hole on some video game stream and he'll come across your stuff, and all of a sudden we'll start a conversation about, where are we going to go hunting this fall and which bucks are behind the house right now or whatever. And they're like, thank you for doing that, because that helps me get the kids outside. And that's what's most rewarding, definitely. And that's what makes up a large percentage of our viewers as young families.
Well, and it's like Dan said, you're a role model. So, like, you're starting to see it more and more with parents coming after you and saying, thank you for doing this for my kid. And then you see it with the younger generation wearing your guys' gear. So it's got to be really rewarding to see all that come to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like social media, but we're on it. And I feel like, if we're on it for the purpose of basically getting a kid to watch something and get outside, then I guess I can sleep at night with that.
Right.
Yeah.
The next question is from James Seed. He said, Aaron and Dan, what mistake have you made that taught you the most?
Dan, right off your head, one.
The one I would say the biggest mistake I learned from was my younger years is putting my hunting before my family, and really putting too much into hunting. And, I can't say I would take any of it back, because it made me who I am, and it made me have those feelings and made me understand that more. But I just think that if I made a mistake, I think in my early years, I probably was not as good a role model as I'd like to have been, because I was pushing people to hunt more and be away from family more and stuff like that. Now I think learning from that, I think I'm more about family, including family in the things you love instead of abandoning them. I think that's my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I kind of went through a similar phase when I was in my early 20s. I was like, I got so serious in hunting and so wrapped around trying to kill a specific deer that I just basically stressed myself out. And I remember the one moment where it really hit me was I'd been hunting for a specific buck on our family farm all fall. I had, I'd use all my vacation at work. I'd skip school, and I finally had him come underneath the stand. He comes right underneath me, and I thought it was a different deer, and I didn't shoot him because I was sitting there measuring his tines with my binoculars, and he was at 7 yards making a scrape, just snort wheezing right next to me and everything, and it was awesome. But I was like, that deer's not as big as what I'm looking for. So I was measuring his points to try to see if he was 150 inches, because the deer that I was after was right at 150. And he walked off, and he got to like 75 yards away, and he turned around, and I saw this extra tine on his left side, and then I saw this extra tine on his right side, and I was like, that's the freaking deer that I'm hunting. And I had pictures of him and everything, and I let him walk because he didn't, that was the first time I'd actually seen him all year. I'd had all those pictures of him, and I let him walk because I was measuring his points, trying to get to a number in my head. And he walked off of there. The next day, I shot a much smaller buck, and I hit him and lost him. I made a mental error and just a terrible shot. And I stomped back to the house so ticked off. I was like, I'm never doing that again. I mean, I am not enjoying myself out here. I'm putting so much pressure on myself to basically hit a number that I'm like, I'm going to go back to my mindset that I had when I was 12 years old. And every time I saw a deer, I got excited. So that's what I did from that point forward. But that was the biggest mistake that I can think of. At least everybody's different, but that's just in my journey, I guess.
What about you, Jeremy? You got one?
Nothing nearly as serious, but last year I had a herd bull come in that was probably like a 330, 340 bull. And I'm still a very green elk hunter. I've been in Montana for a few years. Aaron, you probably don't know, but I lived in Michigan prior to that, and had this giant bull come in, and I didn't have my mouth read in. So I got to full draw, and he goes through this little gap that's probably 10 yards wide, and he would just been moving barely slow. But for whatever reason, he started like chasing his cows off, rounding them up. You know how they do. And so I'm there mewing like a whitetail, like meh, meh. And I did it so loud because I was like panicking. I did it so loud. I didn't realize this in real time, but I filmed it, that I spooked the cows. So as I'm touching the bow off, and I don't know this in real time, watching the video back, the cows' butts are already facing away from me, and they're starting to run. And right as I touch the bow off, this giant bull wheels, and my arrow just sails right next to him. Where his vitals were gone half a second early. So that's a funny, sad story. So keep your mouth read in when you're elk hunting, folks.
Good piece of advice.
Sure.
I think other than the new questions that have popped in, I don't know how much more time we have, but the last one that I had written down was Andrew Douglas was wondering, what's the biggest piece of advice you have for a new hunter?
I would say try to just focus on learning. Don't focus on anything else besides that when just starting off, because there's a lot of different directions you can get pulled in hunting with the way media is nowadays and all the products that are out there and everything. Just if you got a bow in your hand, you got to understand the deer has the upper hand 90% of the time. Like certain number of things have to go right. You create your own luck with experience, but even the most experienced guys hunt dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times before they get an opportunity with a bow. So if it's not happening for you, don't stress about it. But if you go into it with that mindset of just learning something every single time you go, that will create a snowball effect. And I would argue that you'll have more success through time with that mindset than you would, just trying to punch your tag.
There was another one that came in, and I personally want to know. Cousin Eddie Hunts said, Dan, how many pet trash pandas do you got?
We actually have one in captivity. That was humanized, so it couldn't be released. It was when we were doing rehab, it was somebody's pet, so we couldn't release it to the wild. And that one is still around. It is like 7,000 pounds, and it looks like it's got these little sausages out that are its legs because it overeats and doesn't do anything. But it lives in a pen. But the ones that you see in the videos and stuff that I sit with are all wild. I just go down and I feed them every single day in the same spot, and they all come out to visit me. Some are nicer than others. Some of them are afraid of me and won't come close, but a lot of them come right up to me. There's probably about, I want to say about 30 of them that show up every night, and probably about 10 or 15 of them are real friendly. There's a new baby one that doesn't have a mom. I don't know where it came from. Mom must have got killed or something. That comes running to me every time I go down there, and it'll sit on my lap and eat cookies out of my hand, so that it's away from the mean big ones that'll like try to grab it and take its cookie away. It's kind of intimidating. I mean, when I take my friends down there and stuff and get them to sit there, they get a little spooky because they make the most ungodly noises, and they'll attack each other like right at your feet, but they won't bother me. I mean, I can hold a cookie out. They'll come and take it so tenderly out of my hand, and but the next second they'll turn around and just attack another raccoon.
Listen, I want that cookie, but not you.
They like me as long as I bring cookies. You know what I don't like is I used to feed the chipmunks too. I kept going down there and throwing peanuts at them until I'd get them to get closer and closer and more and more comfortable. And I finally got them to eat out of my hand, and then I would hold my hand out and get them to jump in my hand and eat. But chipmunks are buttholes. That's a nice way of saying it. You run out of peanuts and they attack you. They start biting your leg and biting your fingers. And like if you got a handful of peanuts, they learn that if they bite you, you jump and the peanuts fly, and then they get to eat them off the ground. So I don't like the chipmunks no more.
greedy chipmunks.
Right. Raccoons are at least nice about it.
Oh my goodness.
That's great.
Two things on my end real quick. Derek Roush is a member. He gifted 5 memberships today. So I want to welcome new members: Jim Funk, Jay Moya 98, Veteran Outdoorsman, Jimbo Slice, and Alec Nabors. And then last thing for me, Aaron, for people that have been living in a cave for the last 5 or 6 years, where can people find Hunting Public, and maybe shout out some of the other stuff you guys are doing, like the podcast and your social media channels?
Yeah. Basically, search the Hunting Public on Google and you should find us. Got a website, got a YouTube channel, got a podcast, we're on most of the major social media pages as well. And we got some new stuff coming up in the habitat world here pretty quick that we're pretty excited about.
Nice.
That we're going to be working on. So that's coming down the pipe here soon.
Anything else from the chat, Ashley?
It's still going a lot. There's still, I don't know how many more questions you want me to do, or
let's wrap up with one more. We'll do one more and then we'll shut it down to respect Aaron's time.
Let me find. Okay, so George Hamrick, I saw this one earlier. He's wondering like how hunting and being a dad changes things for you.
I don't hunt for myself near as much. And I kind of just made that decision, like I was telling y'all before we started recording. I made that decision a while ago where it was like, okay, this is going to be my number one priority, and everything's going to fall. As far as hunting goes, that's going to be my number one priority. And everything else is just going to go behind that. So elk hunting is still high on the list, me trying to fill my own tags. They're still really high on the list, but they're not number one. So basically, if the boys want to go hunting or fishing and they have an opportunity to go, I'm gonna take them. And when I made that up in my mind, it made the decision-making process a lot easier for me, because then I didn't have to, try to move things around and jostle things one way or the other. If I don't get a buck, I don't get a buck. But if they get to go out and we get to call in some owls, or we get to see a raccoon or whatever, then it's worth it. It's a successful day. So.
Yeah.
Well, all right. We'll wrap it up there. Aaron, I want to thank you again. Appreciate it. I think it's a pretty insightful podcast. A lot of good information as always. And I'll speak for everyone and say, really enjoy the content you guys put out, first class, and the success is much deserved. So that's all I had. Turn it over to Dan for closing words. And before that, we'll let everyone know next Tuesday, 7 Central, we will be back.
I really appreciate you coming on, Aaron. I know you're a busy guy, so it's really appreciated.
Yeah, no problem at all, guys. Enjoyed it.
Always fun.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Ashley, thanks for handling the questions. We will see everyone next Tuesday, 7 Central. Catch you then.